In the quiet town of Millburn, Utah, nestled among the peaceful mountains and rolling farmland, a couple's dream home stood as a symbol of hope, love, and years of hard work. But on the night of August 5th, 2020, that dream would turn into a nightmare. Tonight we dip back into Ballerina Farm, but we head 2 hours south from the hog farm down to the scene where tragedy struck Hannah Nealman's brother and sister-in-law, entrepreneurs and influencers formerly at White Shanty at Home on Instagram. Seth and Jenna Wright had poured their hearts and souls into building what they called their little piece of England. It was supposed to be a storybook English manor, entirely made of stone, but Utah style, inexplicably palatial, with European architecture that seems slightly out of place relative to its proximity to a swig. She wanted it to look like it was from a storybook and 500 years old. The family was best known in their community for having an event venue in the area called the White Shanty, which you may recall as the crime scene of the crime from The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, because it is the venue where Whitney did not show up to Taylor Frankie Paul's baby shower. They used the sale of that business to fund the building of this dream home, what I've been calling in my head Downton Shabby, an estate that has the grandeur of an English manor and the shabby chic interior of a repurposed barn in Waco. According to her, they contracted out the foundation and framing, but everything else was hand-built by Seth, the patriarch of the family, and her husband. He split and laid each limestone himself, handmade and welded each window that the kids pitched in and helped forge. It was a labor of love in hopes of building a forever home. But in the blink of an eye, everything they worked for went up in flames. A neighbor was the first to notice the home was ablaze. The fire marshals were called in. As they combed through the ashes, it was clear the damage was done. They tried to uncover the truth behind the fire that destroyed their $2.5 million English-style manor at cost. I'm not sure what the market value would have been. Early reports ruled out arson, but investigators were left with more questions than answers. What happened? Was it an accident? Negligence? Was it a contractor? Foul play? Was it the nearby forest fires due to the dry summer? Thankfully, no one was harmed, no kids, no pets, no people, nobody lived there. It was half completed at best. As their community rallied behind them, whispers began to circulate. I don't remember exactly because motherhood has made me lose my gray matter. But I assume a young, sprightly Kate Kennedy unflatteringly pinned her chin to her chest as she scrolled into the depths of the night and utter disbelief as she sees one of her favorite FU New construction follows go up in flames. While I share this in a themed format of a show that was often a bit unserious, the reality of a family losing their home is seriously devastating. You can hardly conceptualize the disappointment and loss not only of the structure but of the time and labor and of a dream. There aren't any answers, and comments begin to populate. A GoFundMe is created for the family, and an online community was left contemplating a mystery encapsulated by a carousel of high-quality DSLR photos of this grand English manor's final moments, roofless, lifeless, hollow. Following the fire, they go dark on social media. Eventually, their social media handle transitioned from @WhiteShantyAtHome to @Seth and Jenna Wright. They put their profile on private, which I believe Jenna said had to do with her sharing her political beliefs. They moved to Tennessee. They post on religious holidays, at one point not posting for about a year and a half. What happened? Where did they go? Did the devastation bury itself so deep the artifice of social media felt like too much? The harsh and confusing reality of sharing your life on social media is that the engagement you solicit when everything is going well, unfortunately, doesn't vanish when everything falls apart. You want investment, you've got it. For better or for worse. It's kind of inevitable when you're public-facing that as time goes on and information is scarce, people fill that void with speculation. And therein lies the conundrum of being an influencer. When your business is sharing your home's progress with your community, it's hard to argue your home's destruction is none of your community's business. 4 years later, the story of the storybook manor nestled in the Utah mountains lives rent-free in my head as I record here in my rental, ever obsessing over how a Utah starter home is probably nicer than where I'll live when I meet my untimely end. However, I recently noticed I could see this family's Instagram story, something I haven't been able to do for years, ever since they went private following the fire. The last I was involved, I heard a very top-line explanation, but Nothing detailed, nothing specific, and never really felt resolved because this is all about me. Today, I wanted to go back in time, see if I can piece together what happened. Because this family is known for sharing their former furniture business and event venue and renovations and home build on Instagram. But in mid to late 2020, also became known for erratic Instagram stories that, of course, vanish after 24 hours and become hard to prove. But even the Beth Online community discussed how it went from being angry about the misinformation to feeling genuinely concerned for her state of being. Daily, there were lengthy stories with a line of tiny dashes that by the time you went through it, it felt more like a spiral through conspiracy theories and misinformation and far-right extremism, ranging from the usual suspects like about the election being rigged and how we need Trump to drain the swamp and save us from the deep state, to extremely alarming content that would get flagged and taken down or disable their ability to go live, like graphic imagery of premature babies paired with incorrect claims about the role of aborted fetal cells in the development of the COVID vaccine. But stories disappear after 24 hours. They seemingly disappeared for 4 years after going private. And this month they reopened their profile, and when you look at it now, all that remains are images of a faithful family with 7 kids trying to rebuild their dreams after disaster struck. And I couldn't help but be curious what happened with the fire, what they've been up to after the fire, and maybe I'm the biggest conspiracy theorist of all, because I couldn't help but wonder, is it a coincidence to emerge right before another election cycle with a highly engaging, update and poetic story of suffering and loss and redemption that will inevitably lure people back in, myself included, hence this 2-hour program? Regardless, I'm not sure what we'll find today. Likely very little, because while I have on a trench coat and am trying to cosplay Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries on Lifetime, we all know I'm a little bit more like The Adventures of Mary-Kate and Ashley, and I'm better qualified to be searching for mimes on cruise ships as a super-duper sleuther. But as they say, who stole the Great Hope Diamond? What killed the dinosaurs? How do you build a stone mansion by hand? And what goes on behind rustic barn doors? Welcome to Influencer Unsolved Mysteries, a new series I'm trying that may never happen again, but we'll see, where I dive into niche internet influencer lore and we examine things that, honestly, I just think about often and need someone to talk to about them. All opinions are mine. The information I've gathered is from screenshots from my own archives or the Beth's Instagram posts that are now public, articles I've read, and this episode is for the purposes of entertainment and cultural criticism regarding the role of curated tragedies, subsequent audience response on Instagram, how influencers display wealth and good times and request charity in times of need, and explicit audience engagement and sympathy through soliloquies about God's plan, leaving some of us asking ourselves where the role of your choices ends and divine intervention begins, especially when it comes to matters of things like just wanting a bigger home, a second home, wanting to bring the Cotswolds to Utah, just so you know what you're in for if you want to stop here. Regardless, we have a beast of a deep dive today. I'm excited you're here. I'm Kate Kennedy, your host, and this is the Be There on 5 podcast. Wow, it's always exciting for me to pretend I'm in the true crime genre. I always felt it was impeding upon my popularity as a podcaster. But actually now I feel like wellness is what's soaring in the charts. If you want to be popular now, you have to just exclusively, pontificate about the benefits of unpasteurized milk. Is anyone, what's going on? Anyway, you guys, I am here wearing a trench coat in the trenches of my Chicago basement behind me on screen. Usually I have a fireplace because I like for these episodes to be like a fireside chat. Today I have not a smokestack, rather an icon and a legend, one Robert Stack, who also loves a trench. The buttery baritone, spooky and smooth host of nostalgic masterpiece, Unsolved Mysteries on Lifetime television. And I'm not talking about the Netflix reboot. I'm talking about the 90s show that earnestly delivered stories to its viewers about tales of spontaneous human combustion and showed us photographic evidence of people that had burst into flame. And there was just a hole in their mattress, and they went straight on through to their basement, incinerated into dust. The way Kelly Kennedy was so interested in spontaneous human combustion, when it comes to her childhood interests, I'd say between that and storm chasing, real neck and neck. And Unsolved Mysteries would entertain and present these stories to the audience as legitimate mysteries, and then ask people to call into the hotline if they had any information about what might have led to or caused these individuals to unfortunately, spontaneously human combust. As if I already wasn't entirely occupied with anxiety about not getting my face on a milk carton. This was nightmare fuel for me. What I was thinking influencer Unsolved Mysteries. Season 2 of the Be There in 5 podcast, we are just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Spray and pray. That's not what I meant. But, I was looking for, I just recorded a Patreon that my brain's not working properly. I'm not even going to search for the figure of speech that I will absolutely never find right now. Do you guys remember Unsolved Mysteries? I'm hoping, this show was wild. I mean, wild. Ghosts, lost love, abductions, alien or human. It was at once a very serious and scary show like a Dateline. It's also slightly unserious and, the spontaneous human combustion. I think that's quite literally scientifically impossible. But also, I think I have a tendency to get that show confused with Rescue 911. My sister loved both of these shows. And what's funny is she still loves both true crime and medical shows, and I still don't. And I think these were early gateways to future crime junkies and future Grey's Anatomy watchers. Whereas I would watch the UFO ones, which just showed that I was in the pipeline to eventually watch Disney Channel's attempt at the X-Files. So weird. Remember Fee? We're actually talking about her next week because I interviewed the author of Disney High, which is a book that's a deep dive into the rise and fall of the Disney Channel, which I think is so interesting because it's not a part of really the Disney universe. I'm not a Disney adult. I'm not into Mickey, but I'm a Disney Channel adult. But there's where do I go? I can't visit the Smart House. Anyway, we'll talk next week. I promise I'll get on topic soon. But yeah, I think I actually wrote about in my book Unsolved Mysteries and Rescue 911 because I know everyone says we don't talk about this enough, but I actually don't think we talk about these shows enough. Rescue 911 taught me everything I need to know about all the major hazards to avoid in life. Don't stick your tongue on a freezer. It'll get stuck and you have to call the paramedics. Leg under a lawnmower, by foot. I mean, nobody forgets the first time they, watched a reenactment of a little girl whose art blew away in the wind and they ran after it. And next thing you know, you're seeing stock video of a bus going over a hump, but you realize they're running over the girl and she's stuck under the back tires. She was okay. If you have your hair down in a hotel pool, you're going to drown. If you sit on a hotel pool drain, intestines will come out through your butt. And I think that is science, and you will die. And I don't know about you, but that is not how I want to go. No, not at a Spring Hill Suites. A couple things. One, there's so much discourse about Ballerina Farm, an active homesteader, and, the unrealistic, fantastical nature of her content and her interesting story and, all that goes along with her. But her brother and sister-in-law are kind of an interesting case study of people that seem to desperately want to be homesteaders. And their journey is a fascinating example of what I think this looks like when you're chasing it and can't make it work, when you have some money but not FU money, and the weird undertone of elective suffering as righteousness that makes the pursuit of this highly manual lifestyle somehow this revered part of your testimony. When on the outside, I'm sitting here do people hear themselves talking? The most recent update was, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but the most recent update was, after the fire, we were so lost. We were devastated and broken and exhausted. We didn't know what we were going to do. We bought 7 different pieces of land and 2 homes, went all the way across the country, and nothing felt right. I'm when you're lost by some land. It's kind of interesting because I remember wanting to talk about this 4 years ago. But I felt like it was really insensitive to make content out of somebody else's misfortune. And I like, believe it or not, I really don't like talking about people and singling people out. Like, it took me years to do Rachel Hollis. I really need to feel there's enough layers that intersect with like current cultural conversation for it to be worth it to use this as an example of these like broader topics. Because I'm not trying to like do a takedown or like an expose. I don't hate influencers, and I'm not like looking for crumbs to malign somebody. Like, I see in the eyes of a lot of people that talk about influencers, I'm like, the contempt is makes me nervous. And I am one in many ways. Like, I kind of went into this being like, what happened with that fire? And then being reminded of a lot of like the content that was shared, and then realizing there's so many other surrounding themes. And this is about white shanty at home build, but it's like also not. And I don't know. So I've really like tried to be fair and stick to like what evidence I can find from back then. And obviously I share my opinions and commentary, but I don't know these people, but they are a public facing family who is now back on the scene and who has shared a great deal about their life and who is probably doing so to kind of like be at the level of a ballerina farm, like that's kind of like the end goal if you're going to be sharing your like pursuit to homesteading. And yeah, I feel like people have, over the years have been like, why don't you, talk about this type of stuff as much anymore, or talk about bloggers and stuff. And I mean, a couple of reasons. Like, is my interest still there? Yeah. Like at the time, I was very into like Mormon bloggers and the trend of these palatial new construction projects. And like, it became like common for people to kind of like share with you every step of the way these beautiful and like aspirational new builds on like hundreds of acres. But it also like for such young families that are, of my generation that live so differently from other millennials that will like probably never own a home and are delaying having kids and all this stuff. Like my interest in these families almost started as like a spectacle of like, gosh, I couldn't be in a farther away life phase and you seem so content doing everything so manually and having all of these kids and doing like, like your life seems so marked by inconvenience and hardship, yet you seem so happy and you can't drink. Oh, right. Then 2020 happened and we unfortunately realized, well, I could have probably told you this, but most people didn't explicitly say it, so I could kind of gloss over my assumptions. But it was a time when a lot of the people I followed for their aesthetic or their outrageous home builds or whatever started spewing a lot of really troubling conspiracy theories and rhetoric on the internet. And then honestly, talking about them became not fun. All of a sudden, their lifestyles looked less like aspiration and escapism and felt more like excess. And it felt less like sharing and more like showing off. But I can deal with that. What I couldn't deal with is for some people, the lines started to blur between worshiping their faith and worshiping a particular felon on 34 counts. And I had to disengage, and I had trouble teasing out the real impact and role of their influence in the election. And you almost wonder if you're better off letting them exist in their bubble than drawing attention to it or trying to dispel theories. So a lot's happened since then. And when they reemerged recently, I was like, maybe I'll take people through my deep dive that I would be doing anyways, just as a curious person who was once very invested in this home before I knew more about them. And I'm not sure the best way to navigate this because I almost have to separate the family's story and of their home that burned down and their journey ever since to find their next one. And I think there's like a lot of interesting stuff there. And you almost have to separate it from the period of time in 2020 where this kind of erratic behavior was happening on stories. One, because you can't see it now. And two, it's almost interesting how there wasn't a lot of closure about the fire. But when I brought them up on social media the other day, when, people were responding to it, it almost seems like what people remembered more so than this fire that happened in August of 2020 was all of the conspiracy theories. And that became kind of more defining. So it's almost an interesting thing where like this huge event happened. We didn't really hear much. Then the conspiracy theories became the more distracting element of their influence and brand. And then they kind of dropped off. And if you were one of the people that followed them and were able to see what they were up to as they were private, by all means, let me know. My memory's very jumbled. There's a lot has happened since 2020, and I don't have anything in my head besides Miss Rachel lyrics. But I gather that beyond a handful of posts outside the temple, and one update that shared the smallest explanation for the fire in September of 2021, a year later in a story, there wasn't really a lot there. Maybe there's been evolution since. I could be hopeful, but I don't know. I started doing this deep dive about the home build and the fire before I went and, revisited the highlights, which then kind of changed things toward the end of the show. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. I just happened to have a visceral response to people whose opinions are, I think, criminally cruel in sharing that they believe there should be no medical exceptions for abortions, for example, sharing that you believe a woman or a girl should have to carry their rapist baby. Going through their highlights that are still up now, I assume this is still the case, and it's very hard for me to overlook that. And even really, my goal is always to dive into things in a way that's comedic and critical, but compassionate when it needs to be. And I haven't done a deep dive in a while because I haven't felt like myself in a while, but I did a Patreon this week talking about some of my challenges lately with motherhood, and it was cleansing. And after that, for some reason, I thought, you know what, maybe I can take this on. But the whole thing's not on video though, because these take me so long and over days and nights, and the recording process isn't pretty. But maybe I'll get better about that eventually. But you can still hear it on YouTube, and I'll post clips, because the unfortunate reality is I am in my trench coat, and I do have Robert's stack of Unsolved Mysteries behind me, and it's a cute setup. The thing about Unsolved Mysteries is the cases are both closed and open. Sometimes it's wide open, they're looking for answers. Sometimes they're just storytelling about how it went down. And I feel like we're more so doing the latter today. With the ballerina farm controversy, I don't think I was as compelled given what I know about these, more traditional LDS relationships that kind of tend to skew patriarchal and to have traditional gender roles. And beyond that, to have a homestead like they do, it costs a tremendous amount of money, and you have to have existing resources. And I was never under the impression that they didn't. So following her and deep diving her over the years hasn't always interested me, because it's, there's only so many times I can look at a cow's teat midday. So I've never really had strong opinions about her. And I've always felt like it's maybe not entirely fair when we project onto people what their beliefs must be because they're a part of a group, when they haven't overtly told us, because especially what I've learned from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, that turned everything I knew to be true on its head. There might be a spectrum of how progressive one is, even though, within the scope of how it is in the secular world, it's not very progressive at all, even though I definitely have done that in the past. I'm trying to get better about not saying you're a part of this, therefore you're why. Because, listen, I got married in a Catholic church. Am I a devout Catholic? No. Hate the leadership, love the vibes. I dig a cathedral. So I'm trying to be better about not making too many assumptions. But when you tell me overtly how you feel, it's a different story. And I think sometimes it's both healthy and soul-crushing for me to be reminded how much support there is for this very cruel point of view in the name of God's love. And you know how I feel about all that, and it kills me. This woman, Jenna, is very strong and vocal about her beliefs, so I'm sure she'd be comfortable with people having opinions about them and sharing theirs. So in case you weren't picking up on a theme here, one of my Roman empires, or in this context, one of my leading mystery categories, is spontaneous home combustion. Because I'm very scared of house fires. I'm very interested and suspicious when something catastrophic happens in a circumstance where an influencer tends to heavily advertise their lack of vocational training and chooses to take on a large-scale project themselves. And I think that there is an element of responsibility, not to be on a high horse, but something that is frustrating to me about this pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You don't need to be, traditionally educated or trained person to build the home and life of your dreams or whatever. And we'll get into that. That's a big part of Jenna's messaging is, okay, well, you show us how you build it and how you make it. And your comments are filled with people that dream of building their own stone home someday. How the hell you do that? I don't know. I hire out building IKEA furniture. You bring everybody in to build it up, but everybody was left in the dark when it was destroyed. I understand that they were grieving, and I think you're entitled to your privacy, but another influencer that had a spontaneous home combustion was Chris Loves Julia. Their A-frame caught on fire in 2018. They actually very holistically covered the process, even doing blog posts detailing how insurance works, which I thought was interesting because it's kind of like, yeah, if you're gonna do it yourself and advertise the gig, I at least appreciate an explanation of what this looks like when it goes awry. Because while these influencers may have the ability to recoup the costs and the lost time, your average person doesn't, and your average person should not be building their own stone home. Before even, getting to the catastrophic part of the story, I was kind of like, wait a second. Perhaps my biggest question of all I should be leading with is, I am one woman with one job and one child. And I feel at capacity. I think I had a meltdown this week because of how many times I have to replace the GD batteries on these GD toys. And everyone needs different batteries, different numbers of batteries. They have different size screws, different numbers of screws, and need different screwdrivers. And the toys are scattered throughout the house. And then the baby is upset when they die. And even though I am trying to let him sit with his own tension, I also am his mother and want to fix the problem. And so I try to find somewhere safe to put him, and then I look for the batteries, and then I realize I lost the screws. I got the wrong screwdriver. Maybe it's upstairs. I have to find the right screwdriver, screw back in the battery, screw in the little screws. And then by the time I get the toy turned back on, he's lost interest in it. And I just feel like I already didn't understand how many LDS women so willingly have so many kids at such a young age when you don't always have the money and resources. That makes it a little bit easier on you. Well, with large families, you have support and whatnot. Still, it's hard on your body, and I'm deeply curious how the math works. When a single income family tasks the only person in the workforce in the family to self-build, stone by stone, custom homes while raising 7 homeschooled kids in like a bunch of Scottish cattle amongst other animals. So you're not only a parent, you and your spouse are the caretakers, the school teachers, the home builders, the general contractors, the like livestock operators. Sorry, I don't know what farm terms. This like that's like 6 full-time jobs split between 2 people that have the same number of hours a day as Beyonce. But only one makes money, and the rest are just labor. And they're affording this how? And then here in Jenna's own words, so I don't mince words, their story how they afforded to do the new construction project from the archives in 2019.
Just this past year, we sold our furniture business to a company out in Connecticut, and we sold the wedding venue and the home, so the white shanty building we sold. So we've sold both of our businesses and have moved on. Right after we moved out of the white shanty building, we bought this little cottage that you see in my feed now that we've been remodeling. And we are remodeling that while we build to live in that while we build our home in the country, because the dream was never to live in an industrial warehouse and run a wedding venue. As great as it was, that was never our dream. We homeschool our kids and have just always dreamt of raising them out in the country on a little homestead. And so that is what we are doing now. We're building the orchard house, and the piece of land that we bought it, we're building it ourselves. We're generaling it. So we did hire out the footings and the foundation. And then the framing, because we really want to get the walls up and get it going before winter. But the home is going to be all stone, and the style is like an old English manor. My goal is to make it look like it was built like 500 years ago.
That was kind of how she was introducing herself in 2019. If you go deeper, they're open about their story. I mean, she talks about how they had nothing and, invested all this time and taught themselves to, figure out how to do the warehouse and make it into the venue and blah, blah, blah. Like, I do think that the event venue is like impressive. And according to Taylor Frankie Paul, it's like an iconic place you host Mormon life milestones. But the story that went into that is very much pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There's a highlight on their Instagram called Seth where he talks about like, kind of the people don't know how to work hard anymore type thing, where it's like take on privilege and whatever. But they like very openly say that they had nothing, they worked hard, so on and so forth. So we're not dealing with serious generational wealth here. We're dealing with starting businesses, selling businesses, using the profits to start and sell other businesses or buy and attempt to develop land, which I think is his job now. But like also the tremendous number of hours of labor you have to put in to do this yourself. It confuses me because to make money, you have to work your regular job. And then if you take on another job to hand build your home stone by stone, but then you're also renovating the house you bought to stay in while you're building the other one. And you also have livestock. And you also talk about how you're starting multiple other businesses together as a couple. And you also run an Instagram account with very curated content, which the easier it looks means the more work goes behind it. And I know it's actually not that easy. And you also homeschool your children. It would be a lot to have, 2 children in school, but 7 children not in school. You're homeschooling for their entire K through 12 education while you have 12 jobs. It wasn't computing to me. And normally I would grab my moleskin, try to do the math, carry the 2. But unfortunately, I learned in Jenna's homeschooling highlight on Instagram that my public school education is a sham. So I don't think I'm qualified. Okay, so their Instagram, I'm just going to look at the posts announcing the fire. And wait, let me go look one post, like a couple posts before to see if like anything was going on. This is from late July 2020. Again, the fire was August 5th. It says, there's a lot I don't know about right now. I have questions and fears and unknowns, but one thing I know for sure is God is still in control. With so many things out of our control, the things that truly matter, family, home, our children, our marriages, those are still ours to protect, to nurture, teach. And no mandate can change what is taught within the walls of our own homes. No force for evil can penetrate a godly home and family. Guys, I was reading this. I was like, oh, shit was going down before the fire. Like, I think they were having problems. I was wondering if someone had a terminal illness. No, it was that 500-word essay was just expressing her concern and sorrow for the mask mandate. Okie doke. Okay, so when I tell their audience August 5th, 2020, this is the Instagram post. And I remember so they shared the fire with these curated images, and then like other people would post stories and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And then like they would reshare stories about people sharing about their house fire. This is just an interesting category of like social media interaction that I never really know how to think about, because I know everybody's different in how they grieve and process. But and I've talked about my traumas on my podcast in the name of like sharing. So I get that, absolutely. But it also is like, it was a lot of social media activity for something like pretty devastating that was going on. And I think a lot of people were like, well, that's different. And what's perhaps the craziest is, and I don't remember this, but this is what Beths have told me. So allegedly, because I was kind of wondering, so were people like on board initially, or were people like suspicious? Because the unfortunate reality of house fires is people are often suspicious. That's even why they require such investigations. That's not people being assholes or trolls. That's just like statistically, unfortunately, there are situations where people take advantage of a full payout on the finished structure's home and might do this. But, of course, that's a really harsh thing to accuse somebody of, especially while they're in real time going through something. But some of the best told me that more so than people being suspicious was people thinking it was like far left activists or like Antifa doing it because of their political beliefs. And a lot of the comments that I can't see now, so I don't know, were about like how they're under attack and their values are under attack and, like keep being a warrior of Christ, mama type thing. Um, and apparently one of the only reasons she even said an initial like comment or cause was to kind of dispel that, which is probably a good thing because that's insane. I forget how crazy those times were, you guys. Like, of all things that these boogeymen, far left type people, they think are worried about in 2020, it's your like empty English manner. I don't know. It doesn't that doesn't really track for me. But anyways, yeah, my initial speculation was more about the DIY of it all, which I'll get into. But anyway, so this is the first post about it. It's these like really striking photos of the house like on fire. The caption says, "We are all okay. All of our animals are safe. Everyone is accounted for. It could have been so much worse. The house is a total loss. Our hearts are broken and we are in shock. But we believe in a God with a plan much bigger than our own, and he will make beauty of these ashes." And it's a carousel of, there's a couple curated photos of the house ablaze, kind of a weird feeling. And I think in general, something that always makes me feel a little strange about influencers is kind of that, a DSLR on a dark day, right? The near cinematic, crisp, high-res images of their house ablaze posted in feed. Not a hose or fireman and site interfering, but a camera on site to capture it somehow, a good camera. And, I think that with influencers, it's like, okay, well, this is your job, to be fair. Do you bring high-end equipment to life's defining moments, whether marked by sorrow or joy? Or by nature of your job, do you just always happen to have high-end equipment with you? And I think that like that photo of the house completely ablaze and the fire not being put out, I'm just like, how did this photo even happen? It's almost just like, let it burn. You know what I mean? It freaks me out. And I love Christoph's Julia's rugs. I have several of them. When they go to see their A-frame for the first time after the fire, there's like a videographer. They have a drone. They like made a trailer. I don't know. There was just all this beautiful footage. But I think what's interesting sometimes, especially about religious influencers, is there is almost a need for the capturing of these moments of hardship, because on a spectrum of referring to it to exploiting it, these hardships are often brought up in the context of testimony. But I also have noticed that all of my takes are purely anecdotal from the available data in my brain outside of the Miss Rachel lyrics from people I followed over the years. But I have noticed that more so than a common denominator I can find with other people and how they post grief-related content, there is a commonality for Mormon influencers to pose with or next to caskets. That could be a cultural thing. Of how death is viewed, how funerals are handled. I'm not totally sure. I myself am not a casket poser or poster, but like this, I don't know. There could be something else here that I'm not like really understanding about, like a value of scribing and sharing and documenting life and death. Who knows? Because in some ways, I mean, in my experience in the evangelical church, there's, something virtuous that people find in suffering and in sacrifice. And it's interesting to watch when things happen in online religious communities and the way that that narrative is kind of used going forward to kind of define their image. And I've now seen a couple times it's like hashtag or comment about beauty from ashes. So I don't know, maybe that's kind of the tagline. This is like a traumatic thing, especially if you're a kid. Like, Do we need to be saying it's beauty from ashes? Like, it's just kind of also terrible, and that's okay too. Jenna posted on August 17th on Instagram about the fire. Seth got home around 9:15 p.m. the night of the fire. The first call from their neighbors came in at 9:50. The Wrights drove with their emergency flashers the entirety of their trip. Once they arrived, more than 50 people were stationed at the fence of their property, with 10 police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks. Jenna said it felt like hundreds of others were viewing the scene as the house slowly disappeared in the growing flames. I don't remember many of the details of that night, but I do know there was someone there to pick me up off the ground when I collapsed after getting out of the car. I do know that someone took my baby and comforted him while I couldn't. I know a neighbor and dear friend took my kids to her house, and another got all of the animals to safety. Jenna's family, Seth's family, and some of their closest friends were there at midnight and until 6 a.m., providing help as they watched all the embers slowly float to the sky. Okay, so social media is one thing, but I wanted like a detailed account of the evening, and I thought I was going to be able to find more like third-party mainstream media, not social media, about this. There is a shockingly small footprint, nay, toe print, about this spontaneous home combustion on the internet, which I find surprising because they're known members of the community. Like, this home build was very unusual for its aesthetic and for like trying to bring the English and Scottish countryside to Utah. But there's really like nothing except for two things, and one is them being interviewed, and it's a interview that is like just so telling their angle of the story to the point where the final sentence is their Venmo and GoFundMe. And then another article about a month later that I don't know if it's intending to or not, that's kind of dispelling what was said in the previous article. So let me read through those two. And lots of back data and social media we can comb through. I'm going to briefly thank our sponsors, and then we're going to dig in. Stay tuned. Just like Mary Kate and Ashley, I can solve any crime by dinner time. Lucky for me, even though I have an unruly toddler, dinner time's a breeze. Because I have Littlespoon, a one-stop shop for healthy, easy mealtime and snack time for your baby, toddler, and big kid, delivered right to your door. Their goal is to make keeping your kid healthy feel like the easiest part of your day, so you can cut through the drama of mealtime, time-saving and convenient without compromise. Okay, one of the things that I was very confused by was like, okay, when is baby-led weaning? Whenever people write BLW, I would just think of 3LW, that, early 2000s girl group. And I was like, I'm not feeding my infant a drumstick, but like puree seemed like a lot of work. And I was a little bit lost in where to go. But what was so helpful about Littlespoon, and I paid for this out of my own pocket and pursued it myself. And I say that because I like to work with advertisers of products that I really have helped to make my life easier, made my life as a parent easier. And Littlespoon figured it out for me. We started with their purees, then we started incorporating what they call their bitables, which are transition to table early finger foods. They're already cut to size, which is so, so nice. And this is all organic, by the way. And now we've moved on to the plates, which are toddler and big kid meals that are free of junk, taste amazing. I can vouch for it. I just had a heaping spoonful of the hidden veggie mac and cheese, where they don't know they're eating good stuff. But they kind of help him be a little bit more adventurous with like pot stickers or gnocchi, but also have chicken nuggets and pasta. And they have these amazing broccoli bites. We love the mini pancake breakfast with the sausage. They also have smoothies and lunches and snacks. And I always take a bite because I'm using air quotes, testing the temperature. But if I'm being honest, I like kid food. I like kid food. I did a Patreon this week about how overwhelming I find a lot of this stuff to be, all of the changes and transitions. And I will say Littlespoon, I think, is one of the tools I had at my disposal that genuinely helped me out as a mom, and that still does. And I just am not always the best at like having things pre-cooked and ready to get together. And there's just nothing like the relief of like, I got an organic meal. I can pop it in the microwave. I know it's good stuff. I know he'll eat it and loves it. And I know Tugboat will scoop up every last crumb, and everybody leaves happy. Mention it comes right to my door. It's so flexible, so easy, and everything stores right in the fridge and freezer. You pick the menu, you can change up what you order every time. Spoon makes everything fresh and uses absolutely nothing artificial, organic, cold-pressed. Simplify your kiddo's mealtime with 30% off your first order. Go to littlespoon.com/BeThereIn5 and enter our code BeThereIn5 at checkout to get 30% off your first Littlespoon order. That's littlespoon.com/BeThereIn5 for 30% off your first Littlespoon order. Okay, so when I redid my office, it's a very small room. At most, it's the like desk in a love seat situation. But I'm holding on to my Helix mattress with dear life. I will not part with it. I'm a person that needs an office bed, will not part with his office bed. I love my Helix Sunset. It is my comfy work spot. It's my writing nook. And even though I'm talking about a Helix mattress in the context of being awake on it, for those of you that like sleep on beds, I think it's a really great option for you too. This lineup offers 20 unique mattresses, including the award-winning Luxe and Ultra Premium Elite collections, the Helix Plus, a mattress designed for big and tall sleepers, and the Helix Kids mattress designed for growing bodies, and endorsed by child sleep experts that I'm actually going to grab soon-ish, because what's cool about that is it has a firm side and a softer side that you flip, once they get a little older, and I think they can use it up to like age 12 years old. They can use it for a while, and it's super comfortable. But beyond that, like for adults, it's very personalized, and it's weird to not be able to sit or feel a mattress you buy online, and I get that. But there's a personalized quiz, and it asks you, are you a stomach sleeper, back sleeper, side sleeper? Do you get hot? Do you have a partner? What do they like? And it asks you all the right questions, matches you to a mattress, sends it right to your door. And if you don't like it, it's not a big deal. My Helix offers a 100-night trial. They will pick it. If you don't like it, they'll pick it up. And to this day, I've been working with them for so long, I do not have a single listener anecdote of somebody who has returned theirs. It's such a high quality mattress. They actually make them in-house, and they are like a mattress company, not like a middleman selling other mattresses. They know everybody's unique and everyone has different sleep preferences, and they have so many different mattress models. Such a great policy to make sure you end up with the one you want. And beyond that, at Helix Shoes, they support military first responders, teachers, and students by giving them a special discount on site. Just something to note as well. I want to take my word. Helix Sleep has over 12,000 5-star reviews. And Helix is offering 25% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/BeThereIn5. That's helixsleep.com/BeThereIn5. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. There's the 2 articles, those are the facts I can, wait, I'm laughing because I'm like, okay, so those, at least we have the facts. Wait, the Daily Hit. That's the last time I get my news from the Daily Herald of San Pete County. It says just before 10 p.m., Thursday, August 6th. And then the other article says the night of August 6th. But so how is her Instagram post August 5th? I'm confused. The GoFundMe was created August 6th. Okay, so it must have been the 5th. You can't trust the media. I'm telling you. According to the Daily Herald, the night of the fire, Seth had just returned to the home they are temporarily in. And not long after, they received a phone call that would change their lives. Their neighbors, the Schlappies, saw the fire first. By the time they made the drive to the building site, the home was already gutted. The Wrights' neighbor said we were outside at 9:45 and there were no flames. Nothing suspicious. Around 9:50 p.m., he went outside and saw the whole house engulfed in flames and called 911. The dumpster next to the house was on fire, and there were a lot of embers and ash, and me and all the kids started stomping them out. The Schlappies also gathered the Wrights' dogs, horses, and other animals and took them away from the fire where it was safe. With the Wrights doing the majority of the work on their home, insurance will cover a relatively small part of the family's loss. It was a construction insurance policy, so none of their sweat equity or things like Seth's tools are covered. Editor's note, I will be following up on that later. We can't touch anything until the construction insurance investigative team comes, Seth said. The state investigator came and determined that the fire wasn't caused by arson, but we're unable to determine the cause. The state marshal said you're not going to find anything in this. You could spend a lot of money and do a lot of fancy research, but he says that when it's at this point, there are no smoke patterns or nothing. So yeah, this is their local paper, like a week and a half later, and that's a quote from Seth. Seth told the paper, the state marshal said, you're not going to find anything in this. You could spend a lot of money and do a lot of fancy research, but he says when it's at this point, there are no smoke patterns or nothing, which is kind of an interesting statement. I'm not saying I don't believe him, but I am saying that's a little nothing to see here, that there's no point. Nope. Insurance is never going to be oh, okay. So you, homeowner, who stands to gain from this payout, doesn't think there's a point in investigating. Cool. Here's a check. It's just that's not how it works. So I guess this article again, and I don't know because I can't see stories, but uh, this article is the first time like a vague cause is pointed to, and it says the Wrights have since learned, their names are Seth and Jenna, right? Just in case you forgot. The Wrights have since learned that a professional contractor they had hired to help on the house likely made a tragic mistake that led to the fire. He feels terrible about it, Jenna said, but we hold no malice toward him. We know mistakes happen. It seems like they only did one interview about it. Jenna said their next move was to get a hold of the city and see if they can try to build just another really small house on the property. Just something like a kitchen, family room, and one bedroom and a loft upstairs for the kids to sleep in. When I was a kid, my parents moved to this area. Turning to her belief in God, Jenna said, I can say, look at all we have put into this and now it's gone, or I can say he saved us before we moved in. We thought we were building a house, but through the whole thing, he has been refining us and building us. If this had happened after we were living here, we could have lost family. To me, that's the biggest miracle. We can be sad about it forever, but it's not going to change. So that's the only article I can find that seems to interview them directly. They included their Venmo and the GoFundMe link. The GoFundMe says it's made by Wright Friends. Everything, including machinery to start a new family business, was lost in the fire. Even if the insurance does come through, it won't even come close to covering the amount that was lost. Jenna stands for everything good in this world, for truth, for hard work and industry, for faith and family. Please, if you are able to and have the means, let's help them rebuild and turn this tragedy into beauty for ashes. And then there's another article that I think has a bit of a different tone. So they spoke to their local county paper called the Pyramid/Daily Herald that came out August 13th. This is September 20th. And it says fire marshals are still investigating the cause of a devastating fire that destroyed Seth and Jenna Wright's dream house on the night of August 6th. However, the owner, Seth Wright, told the news media that arson wasn't involved. Yet Ryan Putman, who handles fire prevention and fire investigation for the Utah Department of Public Safety fire marshal, told the San Pete Messenger that the investigation is still open. Jenna did not return 3 requests for comment regarding the burning down of the house, which Fairview Fire Chief Nathan Miner said looks like a castle. It was being built brick by brick in an effort, Jenna says, to create a little piece of England in Utah. Jenna has also not replied as of Tuesday morning to comments from Instagram users asking about the cause. The owner of the house said its value would have been $2.5 million when finished. By the time the fire department got to the scene, bringing its brush truck, engine, and tender, the house was fully engulfed, and a defensive perimeter was built around the structure to keep the fire from spreading. We're all volunteers. We have to leave home, gear up, and get to the scene. It can be 20 to 30 minutes before we get on the scene. A fire will double every minute after it started. The Fairview Fire Department arrived about 20 minutes after a page went out about the fire. The roof had already fallen in. It says Utah State Fire Marshal Coy Porter did not respond to 2 requests for comment. Utah Chief Deputy State Fire Marshal Ted Black claimed he was in a meeting and said to call back an hour later. When the messenger called back an hour later, Black hung up on the newspaper. So what this article is saying from September 20th is that in the August interview, Seth Wright told the media arson wasn't involved. But Ryan Putman, who handles fire prevention and fire investigation for the Utah Department of Public Safety, fire marshal, told the San Pete Messenger it's still open. Jenna did not return 3 requests for comment. Utah State Fire Marshal Coy Porter did not respond to 2 requests for comment. Utah Chief Deputy State Fire Marshal Ted Black claimed he was in a meeting and said to call back an hour later. When the messenger called back an hour later, Black hung up on the newspaper. Later, Putman called. So nobody returned this journalist's calls except the fire prevention and fire investigation guy. But he said allegedly it's still open. And then there's like no other article or any follow-up whatsoever. So thought that was interesting. So as far as I understand it, at this point, they have not said anything on social media about a cause. This is the Herald is the first place that said the Wrights have since learned that a professional contractor they had hired to help on the house likely made a tragic mistake. Likely. So basically, we still know nothing. The dumpster next to the house was on fire, and there were a lot of embers and ash. And then I saw somewhere that she posted in passing or said in a comment even before this article, actually, that the cause is someone trying to help, completely unintentional. But then the article says a professional contractor. I think our lives will forever be described in moments of before the fire and after the fire. Let me revisit the August 17th caption. I know God was there, and I know he's been here every moment since to lift comfort and guide us through each step of this heartbreaking loss. And I know he will make something more beautiful of this than I can comprehend right now. I know there is purpose in our suffering. I have already seen the good tenfold for the pain and loss we felt. And above all else, we are still here together, and with each other, we are home. Hashtag beauty for ashes. Okay. I know I'm so annoying, you guys. And I'm not dogging on faith. I just don't understand interpretations of higher powers, of divine interventions, because, and maybe this is a performance, but most people I know, real people going through really shitty stuff that happens to them, they're pretty frustrated and pretty mad at God. Last year, there's a situation of something incredibly tragic that happened with someone I'm close to, and someone being taken from them too early, and I wanted to punch every single person in the face. They're with Jesus now, in a better place. God has a plan, everything. And I just want to be like, are you insane? Hearing the religious bullshit people were saying to this person who was an extraordinary amount of pain, and it was making it worse, because it was like, okay, so I've been randomly selected as the recipient of this life-alteringly terrible thing. Our God is an awesome God that, yeah, apparently has control over all of this and just made this happen to you and like sucks for you. But, he works in mysterious ways. It's like, no. Afterwards, we were just talking about how profoundly offensive it is for people to say that when it's raw. I don't think acting like, God and Jesus are the good guys looking out for you when something horrible's just happened to somebody is always the thing that they're wanting to hear. I understand the role of it in being at peace with people we love and have lost, being in a better place, or things bad that happen to us. Like, I get that it helps to process. And I think that it's fine if people want to brand their own sorrow in that way. But spinning other people's trauma or tragedy, I think is, I don't know, just a heads up. I'd be careful with that. And I'm always interested in like how people interpret the things that happen to them. If it's a message from God, is it to stop or keep going? Because like this particular line, when she was watching the embers slowly float to the sky, she says, I remember in that moment thinking how symbolic it was that all of our hard work, dreams, and efforts were being given right back to God. It's like, but God burned it down. I don't know. I don't have the patience and perspective of some people, I guess. But also, I think that I'm bitter because sometimes people kind of will weaponize this perspective conveniently for the message they think God is sending someone else, when something that happens to them is a blessing in disguise, but something that happens to somebody else is like punishment. I had a couple run-ins with during the pandemic when things were crazy and conspiracy theories were rampant. And actually, I know of other people this happened to too. It's like if you promoted vaccines or social distancing or mask wearing or stuff, whatever, people waited with bated breath for something to happen to be like, told you so. I feel like there's maybe been like 3 or 4 times I've almost quit the internet. And one of them was how delighted some of these far right conspiracy theorist anti-vaxxers were when I had a pregnancy loss, and they, with suffocating speed, were in my DMs informing me that it's because I got the vaccine, or it's punishment because I'm telling people to get the vaccine, so on and so forth. And, wouldn't that be a little weird? Sorry, I'm laughing. It's like, A, go fuck yourself. B, how does that work? Isn't God like super pro-life? If he was going to punish me, I don't think it would be terminating a pregnancy between 6 and 7 weeks, because then he'd be prosecuted in Alabama. Anyways, guys, we got to move on. So January 1st, 2020, the year of the refiner's fire. While gathering every raw stone and shaping and carefully placing each one to build our home, we learned so many invaluable lessons. But I think the most important ones came After all of our years of work were consumed in flames and gone in minutes, we were instantly reminded we are nothing without him, and we can spend a lifetime or years building. What we can spend a year or a lifetime building can be gone in moments. But it can all work for our good if we trust him. We learned that all the while we were gathering and shaping, he was too. He was gathering, shaping, preparing, refining us, and ultimately building us into something far stronger than we ever could have been without these trials. Our home is gone, but our faith isn't. And though it still hurts like hell, it won't forever. And one day our children will tell the story of their home burning down. I hope it's one of faith, redemption, and tremendous beauty rising from some devastating ashes. Hashtag beauty for ashes. You know what's kind of fascinating? So on the Instagram post after the fire, and this is a post from January 2021, so this is 6 months later, but starting the day after, like the GoFundMe on August 6th, 2020, like talks about beauty for ashes, and all the posts, hashtag beauty for ashes, and the articles she says in the quote, like beauty from ashes. And this is an interesting tendency that doesn't happen just amongst influencers, but maybe it's a way some people cope. And I feel like Nora McInerney has a really good take about this in terms of like, you don't have to brand your trauma. You don't have to like 4P's product, price, place, and promote your trauma, on the shelf for other people. So it's palatable to them, solicits a certain type of sympathy you want. And so it becomes like a through line of your life story in a way that kind of legitimizes it instead of just acknowledges a tragedy, an accident or whatever for what it is, a really shitty situation that nobody deserves. And that, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we're like forced to respond to trauma with like endless gratitude or some light branding. Just profoundly bums me out. And that's, I guess, all I wanted to say. January 2nd, it said, I haven't allowed any newcomers here since a few days after the fire. There was a rush that I flushed out per my politics of new faces, and it felt like all eyes were on me to see how I'd respond and watch me grieve. I just really wasn't ready to share our devastation publicly. I'm still not. I haven't made my account public again. I'm not sure I ever will. But I will say it feels special to have so many friends that know our story. I feel got it, so on and so forth. So then January 25th, there's a photo of a kitchen that they remodeled. This isn't where I thought we'd be right now, but there's something really beautiful about growing where you're planted and making any house your very own with all your own personal touches. This is where God put us. For now, I intend on making the most of it. I'm very fascinated by people that move all the time and that remodel every single place they move. And I don't mean to be rude, but like, I don't know, I'm a renter. I've heard that there are homes that come built. If I ever buy a home, I'm going to tell the realtor no assembly required, because this just sounds like a nightmare. That's something that makes me laugh about influencers when they move. It's like they cannot live in a kitchen that does not meet their aesthetic standards. And I'm just like, most normal people live in the best place they can find for the circumstances they're in and save their hopes and dreams for better cabinetry, countertops, and backsplashes for Pinterest. But maybe for the type of content they share that's necessary, it's something that, like, I love interior design. I love home decor. I think the only reason I work so much is because, like, I want to buy a dream home someday. Like, why do you think I obsess over this stuff? I want a forever home. I just don't know where it is, where we're living, what's going on, and just, yeah. I'm trying to figure out my life first before I plant roots at the ripe, sprightly age of 37. But anyway, there's also something interesting about when your hardship in life is a result of difficulty with like real estate transactions that are elective, and you have multiple options, houses, properties, whatever. So you're not actually homeless. Now, deep diving into their background, this actually recontextualizes it a bit for me, because I'm like, okay, this is a house fire, yes. And I kind of was thinking about it this whole time, like, oh God, this is they lived in their memories, their belongings, their dreams, their this, but and tell me if I'm a terrible person. But I think it's worth framing this as, okay, it is an extravagant elective build of a second home that they're choosing to do slowly by hand, stone by stone. And they have another roof over their head, and all of their belongings, things, kids, pets, everything that matters was safe. And they lost a half-built home that was completely empty, and that is sad. But it's not necessarily the same as a family who is without a home, no roof over their head, lost all of their belongings, memories, artifacts, and things they ever loved and cared about, and then now are rebuilding from scratch. And in that context, now I'm kind of sitting here scratching my head that there's like even a GoFundMe. So it's kind of an interesting thing where when you would try to say like, what went on with this fire? People would almost be like thought terminating and say like, that's so insensitive. How dare, it's somebody's tragedy. It's like, well, yeah, I understand that. Absolutely. But also when you have an account that's talking about this like DIY home build and it mysteriously catches on fire and you don't really follow up about it, it's also a little bit weird. And I think it's fair to ask questions. That is interesting, especially to be soliciting people for money in 2020 of all times for your new construction when you didn't lose any belongings or the roof over your head, when people are going through a global pandemic, social unrest, unemployment, people are having to leave their jobs and do full-time childcare and, virtual learning, and everything is chaotic and going to shit for a project that was a function of your existing wealth, that you even had the option to be doing that. You know what I mean? What's interesting in that one article, an interview they did where they included their Venmo and the GoFundMe link, this is the only interview they did. With the Wrights doing the majority of the work on their home, insurance will cover a relatively small part of the family's loss. It was a construction insurance policy, so none of their sweat equity or things like Seth's tools are covered. But I would actually argue that if they set this up properly, which with a $2.5 million home like this, you have builder's risk insurance, building that, fortress by hand. In doing so, it would imply you have some existing wealth where you can afford the premiums for the better policy, one. And two, while I'm sure there's variability in policy and it's tailored to the project, I mean, the point is typically that the insurance covers the value of the completed structure. So it's the total estimated cost of the project once all of the construction is finished, not the progress or stage it's in at the moment of damage or whatever happens to it. So actually, if they set it up right, and if it really truly was an accident, they should get a full insurance payout, not just for the work they had done, but for the completed cost of the English manor. So that, I feel like, is really misrepresenting what could possibly happen with insurance. And then the GoFundMe says, even if the insurance does come through, it won't even come close to covering the amount that was lost. So they raised $8,437. I don't know. You guys will have to tell me how you feel about crowdfunding in this circumstance when you kind of present as a family that has a lot of means. And this is a home project that is quite, extravagant by choice. And if you know what you're doing and set this up properly, like you'll recoup the full cost of the completed project, which is more than the point of progress of the structure when it caught on fire. So I'm a little confused by all of this. However, it's possible that they didn't even write this themselves, but whoever did attended the briefing where we chose beauty from ashes. Okay, this is why it's important for us to revisit Influencer Unsolved Mysteries, because now we have context and see if there are answers and kind of calibrate them with what the initial assumptions were about their circumstances. And in September of 2021, there's an Instagram story in a highlight, September 18th, 2021. Lots of questions from new friends here. What happened? We hired a plumber to do some work, and unfortunately he made a small but devastating mistake and it burned down. We couldn't save what was left because the foundation had gotten too hot and was compromised. Why didn't we just rebuild here? Lots of reasons, but after the fire, it became a well-known location. It was in the papers with our address and on the news, and we craved privacy. I cannot find this fire spoken about in any third-party media outlet besides the Herald, like the local San Pete County newspaper, and then one other from the San Pete Messenger that I read that seemed a little suspicious. I totally get craving privacy, but also I like knew the floor plan of their home. It's kind of confusing. The plumber had insurance, but hadn't paid his premiums, so his didn't cover anything. Fortunately, we had builder's risk, so ours covered our hard cost. So they were paid back for what they put in to the stone home, and if they did it right, they were paid more than they put into it because it was for the value of the completed home. Allegedly. Obviously, I don't build homes, so I don't know. Like, no one can know what actually happened. So it's good that they covered their hard cost, but I do think that there was like a little bit of going out of their way to make it seem like they would not recoup the funds, or maybe they were worried there was some reason they wouldn't that's valid, but they did ultimately end up confirming they would. Yeah, if an uninsured contractor damages your property, I think that the homeowner's responsible for the repairs, especially if it was like contractor negligence. So if the plumber wasn't paying his premiums and didn't have insurance, I don't know how that works outside of you or your insurance suing the contractor or the contractor's insurance, but they can't do that. But if it's like a family friend or something, and remember early on to kind of dispel or did I say this? Beth DM me saying, well, like early on when people thought it was like far left people attacking her conservative Christian values and by setting her home on fire, to like kind of dispel speculation, she said it was someone trying to help, not intentional, allegedly, or something like that. So it kind of started out as like it was someone trying to help. And then the article said like they found out it was likely a contractor. It's like, okay, was it likely, or do you know it was someone trying to help? And then it was the story about this plumber. And then I'm just, trying to figure out in my head who would be on the hook for what. It's funny because I brought this up on Instagram, like, oh, I like kind of forgot about this couple in this fire. I don't even remember if I've talked about them before. Like, I have no idea. They're just like, it feels like this was a lifetime ago, August of 2020. And like a substantial number of people were like, oh, they responded saying it was something with an electrician. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like that multiple people said that. It's almost, I wonder if for some reason, multiple people are getting that confused with the plumber. If they like suspected an electrician at one point and like said that somewhere that I can't find. Maybe the story changed. I really don't know. And if they actually did get a full payout, I assume that they would have had to prove this plumber existed and actually did do that. But if they did that and pointed to him and their insurance paid out, I feel like their insurance would sue the plumber, which is uncomfortable if he does not have insurance. And I would just feel bad if it was like a true, genuine accident, especially if this was like somebody I knew. But I don't know. I'm not saying there's any funny business going on. I'm just saying I think it's kind of sketchy to solicit a GoFundMe when you're wealthy enough to even have a new construction and then tell people insurance isn't going to pay you and then later be like, oh yeah, we got a full payout. It's kind of like, okay, you did that in 2020 when people are like suffering and yeah, maybe somebody out of the goodness of their heart sending you $20 isn't a lot to you, but it might have been to them. And I really hate that. To me, that is like, I don't know. That's a red flag. Since she gave her Venmo to the news media, I obviously went to it. That's what Mary Kate and Ashley would want us to do. I was just curious if there were like the public transactions and like the outpouring of support. And I was like, girl, you might want to like label this as something else because she only has one transaction and it's from like August 18th, 2020. The fire was the 5th. And it's one transaction. She's paying some guy and it says Stone. And I'm like, you don't want to solicit a bunch of money on Venmo and GoFundMe or whatever, and then make it look like you're finally able to pay some guy for Stone. Just so it doesn't seem like I'm implying that. I looked up his Venmo handle, and it seems to be some dude that like posts Call of Duty videos. I highly doubt that somebody who has a Call of Duty account is the limestone lord of the Latter-day Saints, So I don't think that's the case. What I'm guessing is she paid him to help like move the stone, but still I was like, guys, if I can give you one piece of advice, lock down your Venmo profiles. I actually find a lot of shit on Venmo that supports things I say on the podcast, but I don't always point to people's Venmos because I don't feel super appropriate leading the masses to people's info. But if it can support a hypothesis I'm making, I'll feel better about it. Anyways, she shared this handle. And then I wrote down a note that says, she said the plumber left for the night with pieces smoldering on the ground. That must have been in a story when they were private that I didn't see, allegedly. But I don't know enough about like soldering and welding to like understand the pieces. I guess what I'm asking is that an adequate explanation? If you heard like, oh, a plumber left pieces smoldering, you'd be like, oh, okay. Like if you're welding and there's pieces, is there a house fire? Sorry, I'm an idiot. I mentioned earlier, when people on the internet were like speculating criminal stuff, I was like, oh no, I am like more interested if this is like a DIYer's mistake because I have seen this happen before. Like I've seen a lot of examples of this having like researched this quite a bit. This is like kind of a subculture out there. And something I noticed when I was going through the feed to try to find an update is she brings up constantly how her husband doesn't have traditional education or training. Like this is a point of major pride for her family, apparently. And I think that this is like really interesting. I don't want to be a jerk and be like, oh, was it his mistake? And tell me if I'm terrible. But I think this is wild considering he's now building homes and never had formal training as a contractor. And according to this caption, never opened a math book until he was 21. Let me read it. The caption from April 2020 says, a lot of you have asked me how Seth knows how to do all he does from stonemasonry to building furniture, making our windows, and more. I get asked often where he learned these trades and what his degree is in. And here's the honest truth. He's a product of homeschooling, and he dropped out of college 3 credits before getting his degree in philosophy and political science because he didn't feel he needed a paper to determine his education was sufficient. He had never opened a math book until he was 21 years old when he attended college, and somehow still tested into the highest math course offered, but was running a business of his own at age 16 that paid for his 2-year church service mission in South Korea and his time at the university. He bakes a mean loaf of bread, taught floral design classes, can fix any machine, build any structure, and knows the ins and outs of running a business, and all because he spent his life learning about things that interest him, and not a day of it was spent at a desk. It was all learned by living life. I'm all for self-teaching, pursuing your talents, interests, whatever. But I also think that when it comes to jobs that impact the safety of other people, training is like pretty important. And this logic just like it's fine in some fields, but not all. So anyway, that was kind of like, I wonder if this was actually something he did and like they were trying to cover for it. So if the story is that it was this plumber and they got a full builder's risk payout, that would have to be like they would have to have proven that this plumber exists, right? Also, why is a plumber there that late? Did their neighbors see the pieces smoldering in the dumpster? Was the dumpster already on fire? Why did the neighbor take his kids close to the fire and then stomp out pieces? Pieces of what? I'm so confused. I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm just like, I think this is showing my limitations in terms of understanding the subject matter. Anyways, I got to move on. But I want to loop back to the homeschooling piece because I think that's an interesting, like, potential, because I think it's a really relevant topic currently. And per the Latter-day Paints episode, when I talked about how common it is in this community to, like, do stuff yourself, but things that normally require being, like, licensed, trained, or, like, formally educated. And, like, the popularity of undermining expertise as a means to like kind of talk about how you're empowered. It's very similar to the lack of institutional trust that exists within like big pharma and big government. And like, it's just an interesting thing where it's like, you can only trust yourself and you have to be as industrious as possible and do everything yourself. And it's kind of like, okay, ideologically, sure, I don't care if that's what you want to believe. But safety is a serious issue, one. Two, sharing it on the internet with people when you're not trained, kind of an issue. And three, I think it's worth admitting that if you want to do it this way, fine. And if you take pride in doing it yourself, fine. If there's some tie to like divinity or duty or the priesthood, I don't know. But like, I think can we at least agree that time is money and doing things yourself is wildly inefficient? And if we're also like prioritizing our families' well-being, like constantly living in a construction site or moving all the time, doing a remodel, it's like if you're building this homestead so your kids can run and jump and swim and play and row and go on trips, it's like the cool. But if it takes their entire childhood and they miss out on that because you're like chasing this dream that like isn't being done efficiently because A, you're doing it yourself, and B, maybe you would bring in more efficient methods, but you're kind of stretching yourself because you don't necessarily have the money. Because how does one work when you're working full time to support your family with 7 kids and you're the only person making money? And then beyond that, when do you work if you're also working to build your home stone by stone yourself? But over the years, I've learned like Mormons are very much taught to be self-reliant, self-dependent, independent. Like people talk about how they're the most like work addicted culture, like their commitment to productivity. Even if you go to churchofjesuschrist.org, this like article called The Value of Work, it says, as Latter-day Saints, if we would be true to our religion, we must perform high quality work. It is a matter of integrity. Every piece of work we do is a portrait of the one who produced it, and talks about the increasing concern with the diminishing quality of work in our society. I think this is why a lot of Mormons are successful and like make a ton of money, in addition to the cross pollination and like privilege of promoting people within your own community that you give jobs and stuff. I recently learned that like the beehive brand symbol of the church even has to do with work. The symbol of industriousness that embodies the work ethic not only as a temporal duty, but as proof of divine sanction. This is what's hard, is like all the hard stuff is tied to your divinity. So like, what's a gal to do who wants to take a snooze and not have a kid? If motherhood is your highest calling and to work hard is to be most Christ-like at water skiing, but in life. But I think the context of like her platform being so pro homeschooling from a lens of like the government's evil and trying to control our kids and the devils in the school system, we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's part of this like her pride in doing shit yourself and like wanting to be able to say you went outside of the traditional means of doing something. But I just am like, this is so inefficient. It would, if I was his wife, it would drive me absolutely crazy. But she seems to value it too. But then also, I'll play a clip where I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds like this is the way the dad grew up.
So, about 6 years ago, my husband was working for Merrill Lynch as a financial planner advisor, and he came home one day. I was 7 months pregnant and on bed rest with our 4th child. And he came home and said, I'm leaving. I can't do it anymore. I can't do the 9-to-5 office thing. I'm starting something of my own. And so that began our journey of starting our own business. A lot of you have also asked, how does Seth know how to do everything? How does he know how to do this? And he was also homeschooled. He was one of 7 boys and 2 girls. And his mom was really brilliant. I'll tag them here. But what they would do is build a home every few years. And her whole thing was, if someone else can do it, why can't we? So they would research and they would figure out how to do things, and they would build their homes from the ground up. So Seth learned a lot growing up that way, and his education was all very hands-on. And so I'm very grateful for that, because now we get to reap the benefits of that.
And now he's like kind of making his family live this way. And while this woman is the farthest from my favorite person in the world, I am kind of like, yikes. I cannot imagine marrying somebody under the premise that like they work at like Merrill Lynch. He quits, right before you give birth, and then takes you on this entrepreneurial path that's like buying and selling businesses for nominal profits and sometimes bigger profits. But then if you don't have generational wealth or like a big nest egg, it's a grind. You have to keep doing that and keep doing that. And he's the only one that works. You have no help in the home. You also are tasked with homeschooling your children. And he's never home because he's building stuff by himself because he insists on it. And you're electing for your home to be built with stone, which is like these thing. Imagine. I'm just like, I would go absolutely crazy. But I'm a product of hustle culture addicted to efficiency, and I outsource every GD thing on the planet. So like, I consider myself quite self-reliant and highly productive, but because I'm resourceful, not because I myself am industrious, if that makes sense. These are not values that I learned from church. These are probably values I learned from Sheryl Sandberg. So don't listen to me. A couple weeks ago on September 10th, when they popped up, and I was like, oh, where they been? And then I unfortunately drug you through all of this when I don't really know if I even have a purpose or a point. But I'm going to get into the political stuff in a minute, I think, because unfortunately I started this before I went through the highlights in more depth, and then it just kept getting madder and madder. And they literally didn't really come back and explain much about their absence whatsoever until I think around September 10th. So I think that I must have, I think I've pieced together what happened now. I think I used to follow, unfollowed during the conspiracy theory era. So then when they went on private, I couldn't see anything. And then being nosy, like probably over the past 4 years, I was like, wait, whatever happened to them? I requested to follow, and they opened it up to the public like just recently. So then you automatically accept everybody who requests. So when these stories came up, I was like, oh my gosh. And so, yeah, this is me just catching up live on air. I hope this isn't boring. Okay, so where are they now? What happened? September 10th. I hesitate to talk about bloggers sometimes because, I don't know, what if I run into them and then we got off on the wrong foot? But all I can really do in this situation is make sure my feet look cute. And that's where Mark Fisher Footwear comes in. Actually, influencers introduced me, I think, to Mark Fisher back in the day. Their shoe, they have a winter boot that they have a winter boot that was in style like probably 4 years ago that is still in style and still sells out, that I've been wearing season to season. And that's what's so incredible about Mark Fisher. I'll tell you what that boot is in a second, but they have the ability to seamlessly blend casual luxe with street styles and coveted trends, and offer elevated details and premium materials that somehow manage to be in style and on trend, but not to an extent where you can't reuse them season to season. There's like still a classic element because of the materials and the design, and they just keep me modern on my feet. And I hate that feeling of like, what shoes are we wearing these days? And I guarantee you it's the styles that Mark Fisher Footwear is offering. And I love that you can stack the codes, by the way. And when they have sales, you can stack mine typically, and it is glorious. I recently got in the mail the Zealot pump, which I think I'm wearing to a wedding this weekend. It's a classic ponytail pump, updated with an ultra comfortable block heel, and will add a sleek touch to your everyday outfits. They also have menswear inspired loafers. I also got a new pair of lug soles because I'm obsessed with like the height they give you and like the chunky factor, and kind of like I like a big shoe and how the proportions and how it like offsets. I can't get into it. It's not that tiny. They have a really cute new one this season called the Bermuda, and it's just like perfection in a chunky Chelsea style boot. They have also so many cute tall boots that I really got to get back into tall boots. Do you guys wear tights? I feel like tights are fussy, and I never do, but like I should get into tights. We should sort this out now. I'm obsessed with the Lolita fold over dress boot, but I just don't know how to wear them, and I just need some guidance. This is why living with girls was like the best for those years of your life. I show my husband a fold over boot, and he's like, "Oh, your boot's folded," and I'm like, "It's supposed to be. Get a life. Who asked you?" I'm like, "I did," but it's besides the point. These styles transcend wardrobe essentials, embodying a sense of individuality and empowering women to make a statement with their style. They infuse a sense of individuality and effortlessly transition from day to night, which is the hallmark of a true millennial fashion girly, day-to-night fashions. For understated luxury at its best this fall, shop the must-have pairs of the season and receive 20% off your first purchase with code BeThereIn5 at markfisherfootwear.com. That's MarkFisher footwear.com for 20% off with code BeThereIn5. Okay, so where are they now? What happened? September 10th. So it's a video called The Makings of Our Home, and it's to the tune of 1,000,000 Dreams from The Greatest Showman. And we've got limestone, the making of our home, Stonehaven Cottage. Cute name. How do you come back after being gone for so long? I jumped on stories yesterday without taking much thought and shared a bit about the kids and small updates. Not a moment later, I had a flood of messages asking about the stone in the background, asking if we were building again. Without stopping to think about the flood of fears and apprehensions that were building up in my head and heart, I shared. I told a bit of our story, a bit of where God has led us since the fire. I've had this irrational fear for so long now that if I let anyone in on this broken, long, and sacred journey we've been on to finding our home, and that we would somehow lose all we'd built again. I know it's an unreasonable fear, but it's what I've felt. Trauma does that to you. But I want to be vulnerable. I want to share and give God the glory for it all. Because without Him taking us on this ever winding path to finding our home, we wouldn't have learned the many important lessons we needed to. I felt this gentle nudge to share a bit more here and there, and I'm ready to take you on this journey with us a little at a time. And this is what I was quoting at the beginning of the episode. After the fire, we were so lost. We were devastated and broken and exhausted. We didn't know what we were going to do. We bought 7 different pieces of land and 2 homes, one way across the country, and nothing felt right. We landed in Tennessee, then Seth's dad's cancer got worse and we needed to be back here with family, so we moved back home. We struggled for 2 years to land on anything that felt like home and couldn't find it. We finally decided on where we wanted to be, but there wasn't anything available in the area, anything but this. I love how these stories are told. A 130-year-old, falling apart, historic home that had teddy bear wallpaper and linoleum from the 90s. Honestly, dream home. The vinyl siding they had put over the adobe brick was rotting and had mold underneath it. Never mind. And to top it off, their asking price was one no one in their right mind would pay. So we bought it and began the long road of tearing down, remodeling, restoring, and adding 4 more additions. The front part of this home was built in the 1890s, the town dance hall. It is quirky. It's choppy and has many oddities that give it character. And it's all beginning to take shape. We can finally see a tiny light at the end of this long tunnel. Seth has done it all on his own again. Cut every stone, built every window. Our children have helped and learned so much along the way. And it's been a learning and growing experience for our whole family. God is in the details, even when we don't understand. I'm told one day it will all make sense. Until then, we trust that God has led us on this exhausting journey, one of heartache, restorations, beauty of ashes, and redemption for a wise purpose, and we will continue to trust Him. Thanks for still being here, friends. So on and so forth.
We are not living at the house right now. The room that I've shown you guys is the furthest along. Everything else is, we don't have floors in anywhere else. We don't have any finished bathrooms. We don't have, nothing is finished. It was taken down to pretty much nothing. But we're in a rental right now that is really small and has been really, really hard. It's been the hardest house of all of them that we've had to live in while we're building. And we actually are supposed to be out by mid-November. So if you guys would pray with us, if you're the praying type, good vibes, good prayers, whatever you can offer up, that we are praying that we can have the inside finished enough that we can be in there for Thanksgiving is the goal. To continue that last question, when we moved back from Tennessee, we bought a big piece of land that we started developing. It's over 1,000 acres, and we now have a well on it. We have a foundation on it because we put the mile-long driveway into it. We did start building that one, but then when we saw how much work this other one needed, and how much work and time was going to have to go into rebuilding that original home on that property specifically, because it is very raw land and needed to be developed. When we first started, we saw how long of a road was ahead of us. And so if you ask me, we will be in this home for quite a while that we're in right now. If you ask Seth, as soon as he finishes this one, he wants to keep going on the other one. But that being said, I anticipate that build being a really long process. So
7 different pieces of land and 2 homes. Can I just say, I am obsessed with influencers that request for prayers or earnestly talk about their prayers being answered when it comes to material goods. It's one of my favorite influencer tropes. I think it's hilarious. It's very similar to like manifesting a Nissan Altima when it's like you went to the car lot and bought it, but okie doke. I love to pray for your marble slab getting in on time. I love to think that God does work in mysterious ways when your butler's pantry completed by Thanksgiving. I genuinely don't think that there is a perspective or gut check. And there couldn't even be a realization that it's not that harrowing to have to, wait for it, I'm about to throw up, rent while you are choosing to build another home. If anything, we need to be praying for somebody to come to a realization that to build a home stone by stone is wildly inefficient. And we maybe need to, you know, rethink the limestone of it all. But maybe there's some deeper meaning and connection to it. I can't really find anything other than that they think England and Scotland's cute, which I do too. But also, I'm just like not willing to wildly inconvenience like myself and my family to take on an expensive, long project for aesthetics when I just want to wait till I have like the time, money, and resources to like do it right, do it quick, and to not live in a construction site, you know? I feel like we need to work toward things in life. But I think when you have a family so young and you're still getting on your feet financially, there's probably a lot of pressure to live a certain way, but you're not at a point in your life where you really can. And then when you're comparing yourself to your sister-in-law, probably who's freaking ballerina farm, it's probably like you just are forever chasing this version of a family life in a homestead that you think you should have and deserve, and is the right way to raise your kids. Meanwhile, it's just not that simple to pull off. And so, yeah, I would say it's pretty much makes sense that because of these choices, you're going to have a lot of inconveniences that are going to be hard on you. And I know that it's been hard waiting for the 4 additions to complete, but again, choice. But I know you need a lot of space for all your kids. Again, a choice. Beyond that, this story about what they're up to now, but it's a lot of like, this isn't where I thought I'd be. God has bigger plans. And you're kind of like, is everybody okay? And it's like, they're just not living in like the home they want to. They haven't been able to develop one of the million pieces of land they bought. It's just per what I was saying about suffering and sacrifice and kind of overstating everything being in God's hands, you kind of become concerned that the deeper issue here is like, God's got this, God's got this. But at a point, if every single one of your new construction projects or attempts to build a stone home or whatever falls through, doesn't work, is too manual, land can't be developed, you need to put a well there, a driveway there, and your husband insists on doing it himself. Is this God, or is it choosing to take the slowest, most manual route possible with this pull yourself up by your bootstraps story of like grit and perseverance so you have a good story to tell per the soliloquies written about the fire? You know what I mean? And is it God, or is this entire podcast episode me taking my sweet time and explaining this situation excruciatingly slow? Sorry, you guys. I do think being in a small rental with your 7 children while homeschooling them would be actually extraordinarily difficult. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't understand the call to action for prayers and sympathy and this like bigger story of like God's will, when I just want to be like, hello, these are your choices. I'm like, am I crazy? What are we praying for? Just do something else. And at what point do you just say, let's find something good enough? And the good news is I do think that at this point, that's kind of where they're at. I mean, good enough minus the limestoning existing siding of an existing home and then adding 4 additions. But still, that's good. But then she mentions like one day some gentleman called Seth, and because he knew he was a stonemason and he was getting older and he had a limestone quarry and wanted to know if we like wanted some of the limestone and wasn't sure if his kids would want to take it over. So we ended up acquiring the whole thing. And I'm like, but why do you need to the whole thing? Why do you need the limestone quarry? Is that the best place to be investing your money? You already have so many jobs. Do you need to take on another? I'm so confused. But she says this limestone quarry was a God wink because in the most recent remodel of their temple, that limestone was used. And maybe it is, but also it could be a coincidence if that quarry was near that church and there's not a lot of limestone quarries. Can I just say, I'm not trying to, make lemons out of someone's limestone. I love a limestone. I went to Virginia Tech, which is entirely built of limestone. It looks like a Gothic fortress town. It's legitimately stunning. I get it. Um, I just don't know how far I'd take it, I guess. And if I already was like spending so much money on all this stuff, if I'd double down on the quarry. But hey, what do I know about the rock business? Literally nothing. Which leads me to my last facet of this influencer Unsolved Mysteries episode. This is such a dumb theme that I wanted to explore, which is, so the first one was like, okay, what happened with the fire? And we like, I guess, have an answer, but my unsolved mystery is like that one article that says the investigation was open and then no one ever followed up. To my next unsolved mystery, like something that I wanted to talk about is kind of the timing of her resurfacing. At times when I was talking through this in the house fire, like I feel bad. I would never ever like delight in somebody else's misfortune. And these are human beings after all. But I do think it's important to contextualize. This is a person who looks so delightful and whose story looks so heart-wrenching on the feed, but on stories during the last election cycle, posted some of the most hateful and extreme stuff. You went dark after this crazy thing happened to you, and we've all been wondering what happened and if you rebuilt and your engagement couldn't be higher. If we're going to be conspiracy theorists, I feel like it's pretty convenient. It's right before an election. No, I can't find a lot of this. And obviously stories disappear and I can't find a lot of the stuff, but I'll walk you through some of the stuff on her stories. The homeschooling rhetoric, the abortion rhetoric, the stuff that's being said. I don't want to have just sat here for a while and shared the story and engaged you in their journey, but not share this part of it as well that I think is possibly part of this broader agenda, allegedly. Again, I don't know if she's evolved. She hasn't engaged politically, at least not that I know of recently. And this may be not the case at all, but just something to be mindful of if you're following their journey. Like they really have a lot of incredibly hateful views that made it even hard for me to do this episode and to like try to explore my compassion, because it really makes me angry that the people who are like raising the most kids really think that this is like love and light and the way to be supportive. It's just disgusting. Like one Beth DM me and said it went private after she thought that it also like part of them going private. So remember I said that like her caption said going private was for her political views, but then it was also said it was because of the fire. And then one Beth DM me saying that she thinks that they went private after she posted a Q&A box. And somebody asked how she would feel if one of her kids was gay. And her response was something like, they won't be gay because I'm teaching them better than that. And there was a ton of backlash, like even in Utah, like amongst influencers in Utah, because that's you're just like, oh, you're fucking crazy. Like you're teaching them better than that. Also, you're saying that, and it's also kind of implying like that would never be acceptable. You would never love them. I'm just like, these are the people that I don't think should be having kids. Like, this is so troubling. And I just worry about children growing up in these environments that won't have the support they need and the mental health implications of that. I even feel like the Mormon, like the LDS church is kind of backpedaled being like, they kind of will performatively say things so they don't seem homophobic. Like, oh, we welcome all walks of life. But then it's like, oh, but you just can't get married in our church or like get a temple recommend or whatever. Like, I don't know where they stand now, but like a lot of mega churches did that. Even the Catholic Church, it's like they want the performative credit of seeming like they accept everybody because they knew if they were actually legitimately decent people, they would understand that like the love and light of Christianity like really should be about acceptance. Give me like you're tired, you're poor, you're weak, you're sick, you're struggling, and not give me your wealthiest, whitest, heterosexual, well-behaved people that are worthy to be here, and then take 10% of their income and put it in a $100 billion investment portfolio with $51 billion in publicly traded stocks and not humanitarian aid despite not paying taxes that some have called a clandestine hedge fund disguised as a charity, but I don't really have an opinion. And yeah, looking through the highlights at the abortion opinions with no medical exceptions and, her sharing people's stories of like carrying rapist babies and why it's so important and there should be no exceptions. And I'm just like, I can't find her take on incest, but very curious. And it's just, I don't need to tell you guys why it's upsetting, but then reading her highlights about how many miscarriages she's been through was at once heartbreaking and eye-opening, because I was kind of like, oh my God, she's been through a lot. Like she's had a lot of really tough stuff happen throughout her pregnancies. and has had a tremendous amount of losses. And I don't care who you are. My heart breaks hearing somebody detail those experiences. It's terrible. It also goes to show how far gone the issue of abortion is and how misrepresented it is and how effective it's been over the years to paint it as a very specific circumstance that looks a certain way and not the broad spectrum of medical needs and treatment it covers. Because if people knew that, they would feel very differently about it. And to see somebody speak through their heartbreaking miscarriages in one breath and then say that there should be absolutely no medical exceptions for abortions in the next, it's not surprising, but I guess a sad reminder of how effective all of this is in absolutely flooding your environment with so much noise that you never get a moment of like peace or clarity to realize you are acting unequivocally against your and your daughters and all women's best interest by promoting this bullshit is breathtaking to me. And yeah, if I wanted to get really off course, I would tell you about how profoundly upsetting and disappointing it is that there's such a misunderstanding about abortion as healthcare and that women who revere motherhood as divinity, they care about it so much, don't understand how dangerous it is to have these choices up to the states, to have these lawmakers interfering with our medical decisions. It's killing more women than it is protecting babies. And to fall for this propaganda that misrepresents the issue at the expense of a population that is going to be affected by these because they're going to be having a lot of babies. And a lot of those pregnancies won't go to term. And a lot of those miscarriages may need to be managed through medical intervention. And it is a problem that women are being pushed as close to death as fucking possible because doctors are too afraid to intervene because of the general murkiness of what is or isn't life-saving. And you shouldn't have to be super almost dead to be given medical treatment that is well known and scientifically proven to save the mother's life, to minimize infection, risk of sepsis, preserve future fertility and beyond, just because a doctor's afraid of losing their license and it has to factor liability above patient best interest. It's really scary. And people that hawk their belief in love and light in God and motherhood, putting so many other women who want to become mothers in danger, who are trying to do the same thing they're doing and build their families, who are trying to exercise their choices about when and how they become mothers. I know that a lot of these people are part of a system that by design doesn't allow for a lot of interaction with people of different walks of life that may introduce new information or perspectives. And when your religion is so intertwined with your family and community and going against those tenets puts the things most sacred to you at risk by way of their requirements, it's not exactly easy to push back and ask questions. And I'm empathetic of that to a point. But also, I do think that you do have a level of agency and you do have access to information. You have access to countless other people's stories. You have the internet. You, as a person that is raising children, that's raising daughters, can do right by them and make sure the circumstances that you're raising them in are the safest. And when it comes to the church having a hard and fast stance on matters that are medical and not at all spiritual, I think it's terribly negligent. And beyond that, I don't have a lot of patience or sympathy for grown-ass women raising daughters who aren't taking a second to realize that when you're promoting things like no medical exceptions for abortions and sharing all sorts of nonsense and attempts to paint this redemptive and righteous arc for something as vile and criminal as a woman who is raped being forced to carry and birth her rapist's baby, I'm sorry, but you need to take a look in the mirror and understand the involvement you have in the active legitimization of sexual violence. And I just don't feel like you growing up in a narrow environment, like, is an excuse. Not to draw unnecessary parallels here, but going through this, it all just makes sense how imposed suffering is perceived as redemptive. And if that's a mindset, and even the most casual of spaces where a situation that is not necessary but induces hardship, spontaneous home combustion can be spun as beautiful, sacrificial, and virtuous, then almost anything can be justified as necessary. Almost any form of abuse could be written off or romanticized as a plot point for testimony. And that's what scares me, is this legitimization of sexual violence, this lack of accountability for things that are preventable, things that are criminal, and finding it in you to involve God to say something beautiful came out of it. It's like, fuck that. I just do not understand. Can I really quick just rant about some of the homeschooling stuff? Because I can't overstate that, like, this is such a big part of what seems to be their messaging, especially with Seth not having traditional training. And I think the homeschooling conversation is important to have because there's so many things influencing it right now, not to mention people being fucking terrified to send their children to school, which I relate to. Having lived through a school shooting and now having a child, it's, I need to breathe into a paper bag. But I want to be clear that I think homeschooling can be done responsibly. I think there are valid reasons people do it. I know some of you do, and I'm not trying to malign the entire effort. I think that some forms of secular homeschooling are fine. I think that these extremist Christian curriculums are a huge problem. I think the normalizing of distrust of the public education system has catastrophic implications. I think that the lack of transparency and reality being presented to people on the internet by these influencers in terms of what an immense privilege homeschooling is that most families absolutely cannot afford to do. It's like, it's fascinating to me to read like some of the DMs she posts about homeschooling, about like how dark, corrupt, and scary the world in the future is looking, all the evil, how the government thinks they know what's best instead of birth parents. And like the worst, she'll like share like people that have thanked her, like, Jenna, thank you so much for linking us up with some really sound information regarding immunizations. And more importantly, the horrifying reality of the way it's being handled in the lawmaking arena. My mind is opened in a new way because I've unearthed reliable sources of facts and scientific data through your stories. And this is so crazy. And Jenna says, our medical freedoms matter. What goes into our bodies matters and should never be mandated by the government. Oh, so it should be your choice? I am going to spontaneously human combust. I am so glad I'm not doing this one on video. Because at this point, I'm too hot. I've taken off my trench coat. I'm perched on my chair like Ariana Grande was on that stool on that album cover, but I'm like twice her size. And it's just, yeah, it's nothing anybody needs to be watching. Homeschooling, like I watched some of the videos and it's just a bunch of people mad about sex ed and science and trying to shelter their kids to a point where, sure, you're preserving their innocence, but you're also not really allowing them to mature and have a realistic understanding of things that they need to know before they go out in the world, because there are really dangerous implications. And while I do think you should pace yourself, and I do think there are examples of things that are widely inappropriate for kids that I wouldn't want mine being exposed to, I think that, yeah, that is what you have control of within your home. And I think that whatever like public school boogeyman people think is like trying to compromise the innocence of the children, and then it goes as extreme to like, you know, trafficking the deep state and shit. I'm just like, you guys, I don't know. They just like, really want to be these like heroes just saving their littles. And I just don't really understand where this like deep-seated fear comes from, other than all of the points I'm been listening and reading like through these highlights are like, they want their kids to have a Christian education, which like, okay, but it's not like some nefarious pedophilic effort that people don't want their kids to have Christian educations. It's because like this country that you love so much because of your freedom is also the country like people like me love because I'm free from theocratic rule. And that's what you want for us. And like, that's insane. Like, that's just not what America should be, I don't think. And I know you'll be like, one nation under God, founding fathers. Cool. I don't care. It's literally like you are arguing for forcing people to practice your faith in a country that has freedom of religion. Like it's insane behavior. And I just like the arguments are just, yeah. What's the opposite of airtight? Okay. And like there's a bunch of memes posted. This infuriates me. And then I'll let you go. This is like a meme quote in Jenna Wright's highlights that says, "Is there any idea more radical in the history of the human race than turning your children over to total strangers whom you know nothing about and having those strangers work on your child's mind out of your sight for a period of 12 years? Could there be a more radical idea than that? Back in colonial days in America, if you proposed that kind of idea, they'd burn you at the stake, you mad person. It's a mad idea. It genuinely kills me to think about how many parents are struggling and unsupported, doing the most for their family, who don't have the option to be at home and teaching their kids, coming across these stories, and then becoming afraid that their kids are genuinely out there at a public school being poisoned by strangers, as if every single teacher at every single K through 12 school has some nefarious agenda by the deep state, when teachers are the hardest fucking working people in the world who do not have to do that job, but chose it anyway, dealing with student debt because to educate people, you have to have an education and get paid the absolute least, have to constantly dip into their own funds to support their classroom's need. And on top of all of that, get treated like this by parents because of conspiracy theories, by online influencers that are so dense, they literally post shit about how fetal cells used to develop vaccines in the 1960s when injected into the opposite sex make you gay. Does your unpasteurized milk make you a cow? You ingest DNA all the time. I'm making a stupid argument because this is a stupid argument, but there are endless studies you can read through that explains exactly how stem cells are used in immunization development and how that is absolutely not a thing. It's baseless, it's categorically incorrect, and it spreads like wildfire because it's an exciting intersection of two things they hate: LGBTQ plus individuals and big pharma. This is like a quote in Jenna Wright's highlights from Brigham Young. "I want to enlist the sympathies of the ladies among the Latter-day Saints to see what we can do for ourselves with regard to schooling our children. Do not say you cannot school them, for you can." Brigham Young married 15-year-olds. He had 56 wives. I would rather a stranger on the side of the road educate my kid for 12 years because I bet statistically a normal human has a better chance at having a morsel of morality than that dude. And what concerns me is a lot of the people that believe this were homeschooled themselves under a Christian curriculum that employs magical thinking as your North Star and not science. When you as a human being are living and operating on this earth and not dead because of science. And she shares a bunch of books and she says, "Well, I love these books about homeschooling. Nothing trumps your God-given intuition. And when you start your day in the scriptures and ask God to guide your efforts in teaching your babies what he would want them to know, you can't go wrong. No one is more qualified to teach them than you. God gave them to you and he will assist you in your efforts. Don't doubt yourself. And when you have a bad day and feel like throwing in the towel, do it for the day. Then wake up and try again. Give yourself grace, give them grace." I mean, it is the most casual. The quote, "I don't think God meant for us or our children to struggle under the weight of someone else's idea of a proper education. As parents, we are or should be free to choose what we deem best for our children." Yeah, to like emotionally guide them through life and develop their character. But I don't know trigonometry. Like, what am I going to stand at the kitchen table and be like, "Okay, kids, King Henry died Monday drinking chocolate milk." This is what's interesting. We talked about in Latter-day Saints. It's like, I don't know if it's delusion, I don't know if it's audacity or what it is, but this complete and total disregard for expertise, for training, for skills, for education, and using your faith and belief in God to think that you know best and you can figure it out and your way is the best way, when quite literally all of this training and these jobs and these vocations exist because the stakes are so high for doing this wrong. And like, where does it end? The erosion of the expert is a huge problem. And something I want to talk to Emily about, when Emily on your phone, when we do the wellness to like the wellness conservative pipeline, is I want to talk about how, like, with any far gone conspiracy theory, there are like seeds of truth it's based on. Like, look at uh, the truth about Epstein, and then like the child trafficking propaganda that was like blown like way out of proportion in 2020. Yes, this happens, but it's not Pizzagate, you know? I struggle to navigate sometimes too, because there are parts of big pharma I don't trust. There are parts of Western medicine I don't trust. I think women are criminally under-researched in everything, and our treatment protocols are based on old or irrelevant studies, and the world has changed, or they're based on men's needs. And like, even I found that the process of trying to navigate like fertility and stuff was pretty crazy, because I'll tell the story another time. Like, I kind of went rogue during that process uh, because I wasn't getting what I needed from doctors, and I kind of felt like what I did worked. Because we don't know a lot about it. There's not a lot of research. Like, these things aren't prioritized, and that frustrates me. But like, how do we healthfully maintain perspective and navigate the truths that exist within the disservices done within the medical community, within large institutions and major corporations and government institutions that aren't serving us, without it having to go so far as to not believe anything anyone says ever at the expense of public safety? I find the whole thing very confusing, because it's like this mama bear protective, fierce love of kids that I find to be so at times neglectful of kids' best interests. And yeah, again, off topic. Where was I? Sorry. You're probably like, why are you so fired up? I think now as a parent too, I'm like, what? And I can't help myself. And I know I'm being on a high horse and I'm being judgy. But honestly, bring back being judgmental 2024. And in terms of like her being really proud of her husband for not opening a math book till he was 21, and her talking about the value of like being outside and playing and exploring and nurturing people's talents. Like, I agree with all that, but to me, that is not an opposition to a proper like education. And I'm all for finding ways to leverage kids' gifts outside of the traditional grading system that doesn't always serve people who are smart in non-traditional ways, or ways that the institution just doesn't recognize. Like, I get that. I think that there's like a level of insularity from how the real world functions that if you look at, if anybody that watches Welcome to Plathville, or, has followed the Duggars, can see coming from a mile away, where it's a really sad thing that you're trying to like keep your littles so, close to the nest. And I even think the language of littles is interesting, because it almost implies that like you want to keep them little, you want them to be children forever. You're not really treating them and raising them to be adults. You're trying to shield them and keep them young for as long as possible. I think it's a little bit sad and ironic in how people aren't like picking up on how many examples there are of families where the quest to hold your kids tight and keep them safe shelters and poorly equips them for the real world in a way that there are serious consequences, and creates ultimately distance from parents and kids due to resentment. To tie it back to what I was saying in a very windy way, there just seems to be a lot of like subtle recruitment efforts happening to kind of suck people into this orbit. Oh, did I mention earlier that when the home burned down, again, Ballerina Farms, the sister-in-law, like all the family members were like posting a GoFundMe and like sending prayers, but not Ballerina Farm. Isn't that kind of interesting? I think they might have had a rift, but no one knows why. Like, I can't find anything. And for a time they didn't follow each other, but now they do. I'm hopefully they repaired and figured it out. But I mean, it does kind of look like the Hannah's lifestyle represents an ideal that the rights have been chasing, and they keep running into the wrong thing. And can't say I wouldn't be resentful of my JetBlue Air sister-in-law, Juilliard ballerina that cranks out babies, goes to pageants, and breezily kneads dough, milks a teat, tethers a hog, does a pirouette, runs through fields with her many children before going inside to snack on handmade mozzarella from their dairy cows that are probably more popular than me because their milk's unpasteurized, and takes a lovely meal out of their $18,000 oven and sits around a table and can lay their head down after an exhausting day of elective manual labor that even if they mess up, even if they've ruined machinery, even if their home lights on fire, they lose it all, their meat boxes don't sell, they will be fine. If Seth and Jenna really are victims of a contractor just being casually careless and lighting their life on fire, and Ballerina Farm was my sister-in-law, and while this is going down, I'm watching her explode into a national beloved phenomenon with millions and millions of followers. Meanwhile, she's already insanely rich and her life seems... I would hate her. She'd be my arch nemesis. Would she ever know it? God, no. I don't want to miss out on the sourdough. But I would imagine that would be hard. While it is a problem that people may think that it is within reach because of how influencers make it look, I actually think that the white shanty at home couple we're talking about, like, they're kind of a great example of like a watch out for, you can have a lot of money, but it's pretty hard to make this work. And it seems like a lot of these bloggers with crazy money, they would like erect a new home build at 2 weeks later. But the hyper manual nature of what they're doing not only takes a ton of time, but also money. And I think when you don't have money, the only thing you can pour into something is time. And when they lost so much time, they essentially lost a lot of value as well. And I think that they've been scrambling ever since. And I do think so I want people to kind of see, like, this is what a life looks like of constant renovations, moving and trying to pursue this life of your dreams when your life is passing by. And I think reading through the comments on the stone home build, it really was beautiful and it really was unusual. Their comments are filled with people just dreaming of that one day and seeing it as aspirational content. And there are just countless thousands of people over the years that came across that while it was being built and just were like, if only that could be me, I could afford that. I could have a bit of the English or Scottish countryside in America. I could afford land. My kids could run around. I could be living my dream. It's like, of course, that is so idyllic and would be nice to have the means. And that's kind of what they were presenting as. And that's what they influence people, their lifestyle. And I just don't actually think that's what it was. Also, in her update, she tagged this woman with a lot of followers who has a home in the English countryside in the Cotswolds and actually is living the life Jenna wants. And it's so interesting that they became like influencer BFFs after years of going dark. The first update in the life update stories is her with this woman, Irene, basically has a profile that I think is the lifestyle Jenna dreams of and has been chasing for 7 years, but is having difficulty because this isn't England. This is Utah. You've been looking for a home for so long because you're looking for the home of your dreams that exists somewhere else, that was built 500 years ago. And in trying to make that work here, you're scrambling, you're crestfallen, but also you don't, that's a nice dream for a Pinterest board, but you don't have to have that. And I think I'm just like, whoa, the fact that was the first thing she posted about this woman from the Cotswolds. I'm like, she really cares about having this life. It's kind of interesting. And guys, I think it's great to have dreams. I do. But I also think that it's okay to find peace with where you're at. Feel like it's normal to live where you can within your means and work towards something that's ideal, but you don't need to feel like out of sorts and dysregulated just because your situation isn't perfect. Even if people around you are living up to a certain standard that you hope for yourself and for your family, there are always trade-offs, always downsides, and there's always more to it than you see on the internet, especially. I do think Griffin, the Scottish cow, is very cute, but I also bet he smells. So you know what I mean? There's trade-offs. Sorry, I'm a little tired. I'm dating. That's the best thing I can think of to give you sage advice. Anyway. All right, you guys, if you have any influencer unsolved mysteries you want to cover, call or text. The same as the Kate Lila number that you call for questions or advice, 775-HEY-BETH. And I'll continue. And if people like this, please let me know, because I'm honestly, what we're doing in season 2 is experimenting with I want to figure out some consistency with a series, or just so I can be better about. Honestly, it's hard for me to do episodes more last minute and research and deep dive, but that's the type of thing I love doing. And I can do it if I know in advance, what types of things to plan for, because now having a kid and stuff, I just have to plan better. And previously the deep dives were kind of flying by the seat of my pants in terms of what would be a hot story at the time. And then I not sleep all weekend and kind of crank out an episode, but it's just, yeah, it's harder to do now. So I thought, well, it still would be fun to dig into some older lore and revisit things, remind ourselves of why at the time something was mysterious. It doesn't have to be an open case. It can be closed. It can be something silly. We can do episodes where we just talk through little ones. Everybody's dying to know where Taza is. The problem is there's absolutely no way for me to find out. I dug. I spent some time digging around, seeing if that had any, if that was something I could do for you guys, but unfortunately I can't. But yeah, I always hope to do this in a way that's comedic and critical, but fair, and most importantly, compassionate when it needs to be. And not just to the people I'm talking about, but the people that they ultimately influence. And I really appreciate you listening, and I hope this was a good use of your time. This was an episode I didn't see myself doing, and it was a weird combination of mystery and rage and confusion that I don't want to be judgmental, but it's kind of hard not to be. And I don't know how. I just am worried I did not come across well in this episode, but what can you do? We're seeing what sticks. Freaking bread, like I said. All right, you guys. Have a great rest of your evening and great week. I'll see you next week. To quote Robert Stack's iconic line from Unsolved Mysteries, for every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps it's you. As always, let me know your thoughts and I'll let you know mine. I'll be there in 5. I swear.